Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of From Boots to Suits, Life After the Military, the podcast that is dedicated to all those servicemen and women who are in this often complex journey of transitioning out of the military back into the civilian world. I'm your host, John Gaona, former paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. Alongside me, Mr. Glenn Jr. and our special guest, and welcome to the team, Mr. Rudy Skultety.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Rudy's recently retired a couple years ago, was in the Air Force for 20 years, served a total of 24 years. Starting the Coast Guard, went to the Air Force. Man, just you tell us.
Well, right out of high school at 17, jumped into the Coast Guard, did 4 years, and then I was going to be a police officer. That was my goal. And then 2 months later, 9/11 happened. So I decided to jump back in. At the time, I was going through a divorce. So I just went to every branch and was like, hey, how many bases do you have near where my kid's going to be? And the Air Force had the most. So I said, okay, that's where I'll go. And I was just going to do 4 years and call it good, go back to trying to be a cop again. And 20 years later, I retired. So it's... They got me.
They got you. They got you. What kept you going after those initial 4? What kept you going?
Honestly, I think the Air Force or the military in general was just the easy button. I didn't finish a degree. I didn't really have a skill set, and my AFSC was fuels, or my job is fuels, and a civilian airport, that job pays $15-16 an hour. There's really no incentive to get out. I hadn't really set myself up to separate, and the military pays me good, good benefits, good this, good that, get to travel. So it was just, I'll just do another 4. All right, I'll get my degree this enlistment. All right, do another 4. And then I'm right there. I got to finish it out.
Yeah, I think, I was in that phase where, like, coming up, and I was like, do I keep going? Do I finish it out? And then it was same thing, divorce, except my kids were coming back to Texas. And I was like, I'm not going to Germany. I'm not going anywhere else. I got to come home. And so I ended up hanging it up early. And I've always felt like, because I hung it up early, that I didn't finish the mission. I've always had that kind of feeling, like I took off that uniform and I wasn't ready to take it off yet. And it's carried, like, for the last 11 years. Like, I've always had that. I'm like, man, I would have retired this year.
I know the feeling, because I would have been retired. I see a lot of my buddies, they're now walking away and retiring, and I mean, they got over 20, 25 years in. Some of them became officers, but since my situation was a little bit different, I didn't have the opportunity to prepare really for getting out. I definitely feel that void, because I wanted to stay. I tried every which way to stay too. So that just wasn't an option for me. So I still, to this day, I feel it. But now I'm so glad my son's in, so I kind of like living vicariously through.
There you go. And he followed in your footsteps in the Navy as well, right?
Yes. So he's a PR, so parachute rigger, which is cool.
Yeah.
Still an aviation side, so I was just happy about that. Let's go aviation. Go aviation.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. So 3 years removed now, right?
Yeah, actually, in about a week. 31 Jan, 1 Feb is my official retirement date, so that'll be 3-year mark.
Yeah. It happens fast. It goes by fast.
Been a blink.
Yeah.
It's gone almost as fast as my entire career. Like, one of my friends just posted some photos from, I think it was like 2002, 2003. I was like, man, that was yesterday. And then you look at the photo and you're like, oh no, that was 20 some odd years.
That's wild.
Yeah.
The look is different.
That's wild. And as you were getting out, you went through the Hire Our Heroes campaign, right? To kind of land on your feet and all that. You postponed retirement though, correct?
Yes, because I was supposed to retire in 2020, which, COVID hit. And at the time, the military was allowing anyone to withdraw any paperwork for separation. So retirements or, end of enlistment, stuff like that. So the housing market wasn't there. I wasn't gonna be able to sell a house. The job market, of course, was not there. And so I withdrew for an extra year to kind of let things settle. and figure out what was going on. So
Did they give you guys an opportunity to decide if it was going to be a year, 2 years, re-up of a contract or extension of a contract, or was there like a year basis, like you could do a year?
So honestly, I'm not sure. I had years left on my enlistment. I had hit my retirement eligible, and was like, all right, it's time. I gave myself one chance. I gave myself a good Air Force effort to promote. It didn't fall in my favor, so I was like, okay, it's time to go. And so I was in a weird situation because I wasn't butting up against the end of a contract.
Mm.
So once I saw everything was kind of calming down and winding down, that's when I was okay. It's okay to, go ahead and submit my application for retirement. I think we'll be okay now.
Right.
And so, yeah, I was delayed about almost a year.
Yeah.
And so part of that decision lined up with the Hiring Our Heroes, because I had a very small window, because it had to butt up with leave. It had it with that time. And so looking at how everything worked out, I had to like precision retire. So even like the date I wanted to retire wasn't really the date I wanted. But in order for the opportunity to do Hiring Our Heroes, I had to retire at that moment. And luckily it all worked out because of COVID, there was no use or lose leave.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
I had banked up a ton of leave. So I actually had 3 months of use or lose, or 3 months of leave and 3 months of Hiring Our Heroes. So my last 6 months was out of uniform.
So you were basically civilian for 6 months
Yeah.
prior to getting out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you went through the Hire Our Heroes, walk us through that a little bit, because there's so many programs out there that are very different. Hire Our Heroes is one, SkillBridge is another, and they're similar, but they operate very differently. Walk us through your process of going through Hire Our Heroes.
So it has changed. It's evolved over the last couple of years. So this might not be exactly what the process is anymore, but it's still very similar, where you apply, you have to be approved, command approval, and now I believe you have to do it in the area of where your duty station is. So I retired out of New Jersey, but I did my fellowship down here in San Antonio. And so it was very nerve-wracking, because if you don't get picked up, you have to go back. So,
Wow.
and I was like, but so you apply, and then they assign you like a mentor that helps you through the process, and then you do an application, and then you submit your application and resume, and then they pull all the companies that are participating in that general area. So all the companies in San Antonio, the San Antonio cohort, there's 10 companies, right? And there's 10 people applying. Well, after you look at all the companies that are, available to you, you rack and stack them from your favorite to your least favorite. Well, the companies get all the applications, and they rack and stack you from their favorite to their least favorite. And the Hiring Our Heroes does their best to go 1 for 1 all the way down. So
Gotcha.
they try, if the company says number 1 and I said number 1, because you've already interviewed with them, you've talked to them, you kind of felt it out. You like, yeah, this is something I would do. And they're kind of filling you out too. So you go in with a pretty good idea of who your number 1s and 2s. It's not blind.
Right.
And it's pretty realistic. So, you get a phone call just like you would if any other job interview, hey, we want you on the team, and you get all the excitement. So, I remember we were at a like a little wine thing in New Jersey when I got the phone call that I was getting picked up, and I had to like run away from where we were because there's music and people, and I was like, that's not the best look
Right.
for this conversation. So I had the phone, I ran down the street real quick to answer the phone, and
Yeah.
and so but yeah, it's a 3-month internship, and it had nothing to do with my career field whatsoever. It was in the auto collision industry. So it was learning a new skill and learning how to lead in the civilian world, which is polar opposite than how I led in the military. So I was learning 2 completely new skill sets at the exact same time.
Yeah. Walk us through that, though, because that's a huge difference of going from I'm leading in the military to the way we operate in the civilian world. It's a very different mindset in the civilian world, and it's a very different way of leading. Like, there's definitely transferable skills. Don't get me wrong. There's very much a lot of transferable skills there. But leading civilians is a lot different than leading, your airmen.
Yeah, the structure is different.
Very different. Loyalty is different.
Mm.
Loyalty to the mission is different. You can get a phone call 5 minutes before their shift and say, I'm not going to be there today. I'm calling in sick. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You can't lose your mind on the phone, right? I would say a majority of the skills are transferable. I think it's the mindset that has to change, right? So one of my airmen was having financial problems. I can go through their financial statements with them and figure out why, right? I can get into their life and figure out where the hiccups are and then help them fix it. I can have my NCOs go and check, insurance or car loan rates for every airman. Pull up your car loan. Let me see if you're over 8%. I can be invasive into their life as part of my leadership. Civilian world, you get to know HR real quick. If you get too invasive, or if you're too forward, or if you're too abrupt, if you're too, if you don't beat around that bush, if you don't have the kid gloves on, right? It's a lot more emotional intelligence, I would say, in the civilian world versus the military. And I think overall the military is kind of evolving as well. But, I lost a big chunk of my vocabulary when I retired, and had to switch it up. And I had to, again, emotional intelligence was a huge thing I had to learn right out the gate, because I had none of it and I didn't realize it. I thought I was in tune and I was sensitive, and a couple HR meetings later, I realized I wasn't, and I had to work on that.
How'd you work through that?
Just asking a lot of questions, honestly, and just knowing that was a blind spot for me. And, reading books, I had a little bit of a drive to work. So audio books on it, different leadership books, and just it's just like anything, you learn a new skill, right? So I was highlighted that I wasn't making it. I was, I was not doing what I should be doing as a civilian leader. And so I put the effort in to get better. And it was just asking questions. It was educating myself. It was, self-help style books on, how do I say you're screwing up in a very nice way, right?
Yeah, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yes.
When I mentioned this the other day, and I'll say it again, but the military does a really good job of building you to what they need you to be. What was that culture shock like, or was there a culture shock when you got out and, all of a sudden your leadership mindset has to change a little bit on how you lead your civilian employees, and the way that they operate too? Like, what was there a culture shock coming back into the civilian world?
I remember the first time, as a manager, right, during the internship with Hiring Our Heroes, someone just came up and said, "Hey, Rudy, I got a question." And I was like, "No, you didn't just call me by my, it was that, I have a title. You better use it, right? Like, I don't know if they expected to hear Manager Rudy or whatever. I don't know, but it was so weird to hear a subordinate just call me by my first name,
right?
And it be so normal.
Yeah.
So that was when it first really hit me. That title I wore is now gone. I'm no longer a sergeant, right? I'm no longer that person. I'm now a mister. I'm a civilian. It is what it is. But I think the hardest pill to swallow was no longer being a subject matter expert. Sitting at a table, I did my job for 20 years. I sat at tables, and when I talked, my suggestions were listened to by, the wing commander or whoever was there, because I was the representative for my career field at that table. And so to go from that and to know my job inside and out to knowing nothing, it was hard. It was very difficult. That was probably the hardest part for me to adjust to, was no longer being the person that knew stuff. People come to me with questions. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, that was pretty difficult.
Probably a lot of second guessing yourself, especially being in a new field. going from fuels to collisions and just a whole bunch of different things going on. I'm sure there's more self-doubt than you would want to admit because of the element that you were in that you no longer knew, from back to front like you did for the last 20 years. You were no longer that voice anymore. Um, we we like to think that that transition is such an easy thing to go through. We like to think that we've got this whole game plan in our head of how it's all going to unfold, and 9 times out of 10 that game plan falls through very quickly. Did you go through anything similar to that? Did your game plan out as you anticipated to, or did it fall flat?
Like, it's still flat, I think.
That's 3 years later.
Yeah, I still don't think I'm where I thought I would be, right? The issue that I had personally, and a lot of it is my own fault, but reading on Hiring Our Heroes, they're talking the average salary is 75 a year, right? And you're like, all right, cool. Okay, I could do that, right? And I had another friend in the cohort at the same time, and he was offered 6 figures, and I'm like, oh, okay, I could do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then my turn comes around, and I was offered 55, and I'm like, whoa, I can't live off that. Like, that's not what I signed up for. I signed up for 75 or more. And so I came in with a pretty unreal expectation of what the offer could or possibly be, and I think since then, I still just haven't found my footing in my calling, I guess, or really found what I've been trying to do. So I've been out of my comfort zone, trying new things, trying new jobs, and they're good jobs, good paying jobs, but they're just not checking all the boxes. I'm not feeling fulfilled like I was in the military, and that's been a hard thing too, is just trying to figure out where the square peg fits in what round hole.
Yeah. I think that's for so many of us, like we no longer fit in. Whether it's like you, that you went from, because you're not even from Texas. You got here as fast as you could. I'm not gonna lie, you got here as fast as you could, but even when you go home, or you don't, like, you're not the same person that you were 20 plus years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Even if you only served a few years, like, you're not the same person anymore that you were prior to that. And it's so hard for people to understand and figure you out. And then you top it off that you're outside of your element. You're outside. And then, boy, man, I'll tell you, like, I can recall the last day I wore my uniform, because I put it on probably better than any other day that any other average day I would say that I put my uniform on. Like, there was just something about that day that it took me a lot longer to put it on, made sure everything was dressed and tight, because, man, that uniform meant so much to me, as I was saying earlier, like, I felt like I hadn't fulfilled my duty. I still feel like that. And then going back into this world that is a doggy dog world. Man, it was such a hard transition,
Yeah, especially when you have some form of rank. I guess even if you're, E1 or E2, doubt if you get out that early, you got put out. But the fact of starting from the bottom, or what is perceived to be the bottom, that we perceive to be the bottom when we get into a new workforce, how was that? Helen, like, because now you got to get retrained in something totally different. And even though you're like a manager, there's still things that people on the floor might be able to do that you as a manager still can't do because you don't understand all of it. So how was that, juggling that situation?
It's frustrating. I have no problem, and I've never had any problem taking out the trash and doing the grunt dirty work, right? And I don't have a problem with that, but it's hard. Like, okay, did I do it right? And I was, and they're coming to me just because at first I have the title, right? So what do? You go to the manager and ask questions, and it's just like, I don't know. And then I don't know if they're pulling fast ones on me, if they're seeing what they can get away with. I don't know if you're questioning everything. And I remember coming home during the internship, and just I was telling my wife, I'm like, this is horrible. I'm not contributing to the team. I'm just a waste of space. Like I just felt useless. And she's like, calm down. You've been there a week, but it was just, you're so used to contributing and being part of the team and being able to pick up the slack and come up with good ideas. And you're used to being that person that can think on their feet to just, all right, well, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'll just, it was almost like holding a flashlight for your dad, right? When you're a kid, you got to like going back down to that level where you're learning stuff. And I would say through that though, I was the assistant manager, and I actually had the manager. And so I was actually able to mentor him on leadership while I was there. So once we built a relationship after a couple of weeks, I did start feeling like, that sense of, usefulness, being able to mentor him a little bit on, just leadership. He was a newer leader, younger guy, and just, hey, this kind of happened. If you, kind of give him little tips and tricks of the trade or whatever. But going back down to the floor, that little sense of purpose would go away. And and you start withdrawing a little bit too, I think, because you don't want to feel stupid. You don't want to feel like you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know if you're the butt of jokes because you don't know you don't know any of that stuff.
Right.
So I would start withdrawing a little bit more and more, and eventually it was just, this isn't going to work for me. It just wasn't right. It wasn't a good fit. Nothing on the company and nothing with anybody I worked at, but for me, it just, and honestly, I don't think anything would have been the right fit that soon after retirement.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anything would have fit just right. So
if you could go back, what is one thing that you would do differently? If you could go back through the hierarchy rows, through your terminal leave time, like what is one thing you would do differently?
I know one thing is, if I could go back even further than that, just a little bit, if that's allowed in your timeline, is I would have got my degree before I separated. I got my CCAF, my associates, just to satisfy the little box to help with promotion.
Right.
And I was just so convinced that my time in the military and my leadership experience would outweigh any education. I was convinced of that. And after you've told it to you 100 times, you start believing it, right? So I was like, I don't need a degree. I got all this education. I'm good. And so I think I went into terminal and then into the program a little big-headed, little kind of like strutting my stuff, and was severely offended when they made the job or the offer for the pay, because I was like, how many years I got? What kind of leadership I got?
Yeah.
And never looked at, okay, yes, you got the leadership, but what do you know about the job? And if I want to stay in that field and start making money down the road, I'm going to have to start at this lower pay and actually learn the job. Being a leader is great, but you need to know how to lead your career field. And I just didn't have that mindset,
right?
At that time to really think through it that way. And so I think just going with probably more open-minded and more self-evaluation of, that honest conversation with the man in the mirror about where you're at, who you are, what you did to prepare. Did you do enough? Are these jobs not presenting themselves at the pay you want because you didn't line yourself up the correct way? Like those honest conversations are hard to have, but they're necessary, or otherwise you start going a little crazy.
Right.
So I would say that would probably be the biggest change I would make.
And now you've got, you're working on your master's now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Halfway
Through
point.
master's.
Yeah.
Big dog status.
Yeah. It's so hard when you have those unrealistic expectations. The more people I talk to, the more I realize that it's a very real thing to have those unrealistic expectations. I know I went through it. I know, like, I was like, surely as a staff sergeant, someone's going to pick me up. But whether it's the Lowe's program, the Walmart program, somebody was, and like, it just wasn't happening. 3 months went by, 6 months went by, the bank account's running dry.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
It was a really hard time, and I didn't, for me, it was so hard because I was so far away from my installation because I was on recruiting assignment for my last 2 years. And so the nearest Army base was 4 hours away. So I didn't have the opportunity to go through TAP or ACAP or any of those programs that were available. I essentially walked on base and ETS like all in one day. Like I got everything done all in one day.
Assembly line.
It's literally, I had some gear that I held on to because my whole goal was to go back to the line. My whole goal was to go back to 82nd. And, I went to go turn it in and they're like, "Oh no, Sergeant, you got to go clean this. And there's a wash shed out back. You can go scrub it down and bring it back when it's dry." And I was like, no, 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 no. Like today is my last day in the Army. Like you're taking this stuff
The way it is.
the way it is. Um, you mentioned, your expectations around pay, and it wasn't nearly what you thought it would be. Right? How has that affected you over the last couple of years?
And so I think the biggest mistake I made was comparing myself to other people.
Mm.
I have friends that are different levels of pay. And so when my pay came in and I wasn't where they were at, I was like, well, I must be doing something wrong.
Mm.
I need to make more. But when you dissect it and you start looking at retirement and you start looking at disability and you start looking, I'm fine. Right.
Right.
And honestly, at this point, it boils down to, am I happy at work?
Mm.
I think happiness at work is outweighing the dollar sign
For sure.
by a mile. But I was just catching myself, comparing myself to all these other people. And I'm like, well, he's making, this much. Oh, I think I'm better than him. I should be making that much.
Right.
Or, okay, maybe I need to switch career fields so I can make that much. Or, just all this back and forth instead of just looking in my own house and being like, okay, you're making enough.
Mm.
You're fine. You got everything you need. Are you happy at work? And just starting from that perspective and not worrying. I mean, pay matters, right?
It does.
We got to survive. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Would I want to make, 150 and be miserable or make 75 and be happy?
Yeah.
Well, luckily being retired with, disability as well, I can make 75, be happy and be comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't need to make 150 and be miserable.
Right.
So I think I was looking at the whole thing backwards, and I was willing to be miserable for the paycheck.
Mm.
But after taking a job and being miserable, I
realized real quick.
Yeah, I don't need that.
Yeah. And every person's journey is going to be different. So you're in this moment of your retirement, all that stuff. And then you still don't even have a rating yet. So your whole life is basically on hold at this point because you don't have a rating. Now you're not accepting this job with the Hire Our Heroes with the Collision Center. Now you're like basically not even plan B, you're like plan C. You don't have a rating yet. How long did it take to get your rating?
It took 8 months to get my rating after retirement.
That
A little bit of that though was, I have to kind of swallow that on my own. But I wasn't able actually to take advantage. That was part of the negative of doing the Hiring Our Heroes and was I wasn't around my base 6 months before I retired.
Right.
I was in Texas. And so I couldn't go through all the process. Well, then there was the window to go through the process, but then I got really scared because it's almost like your last PT test, right? Like so much is riding on this conversation with these doctors. And so I was kind of withholding. I was scared to do it, withholding. And then one of my buddies, again, networks, they're so powerful. He's like, man, call the DAV. They're awesome. I'm like, who's the DAV? I didn't even know who they were. And so I had to wait till I officially retired to go through the process, but it was so seamless. I mean, I thought I was going to have like 5 or 6 claims. I thought, okay, these little things are wrong with me. I left out of there with like 34 claims. And I think of those 34, 33 or 31 of them were substantiated. and all but 2 or 3 came with a percentage next to them.
Mm.
And it was all through the help of them. It's not a plug for them right now, I promise.
Right.
But they were so great. But yeah, it was an 8-month of just my life on hold. I didn't know if I could buy a house. I didn't know how much money I would have to buy a house,
Right.
because the percentages changed everything. So I highly recommend start the process 6 months out, because my friends that did it within that 6-month process, they had their rating within a week of retirement.
Mm.
They knew right away.
They knew it.
Mm-hmm.
They had no wait. They had no pause period.
No.
And honestly, you got lucky that it was only 8 months and you got 100%.
Yes.
Yeah, I waited years.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but if you hadn't gone to the DAV, right? If you hadn't gone there and you did it on your own, you'd probably be like me and still fighting today.
Honestly, I probably would have been sitting at 20, 30%.
Yeah.
And not known there was anything else. I would have just been, okay, that's it.
That's it.
I guess that's what I do now. And then the longer you wait, the harder it is.
Yeah.
If 5-10 years down the road, it's really hard to make that service connection to the injury. So, trust me, I feel extremely fortunate. And honestly, like, I knew people that would just go like on YouTube and try to figure out how to game the system.
Right.
And I just went in like, hey, I don't want karma, right? There's a guaranteed 10% that they can't prove, but I am never ever saving that one.
Oh,
but ED is not.
Yeah.
That's too much karma out there for me. But I just went out there and I was honest. I was truthful.
Right.
Put all my cards on the table, and got very lucky and fortunate that I was able to hit the mark I did. And just look at other people that try to fake them out with these techniques or whatever they see on YouTube, and they walk out with 40-50%. Because the doctors can see through this.
Yeah.
They've seen a million of you.
Yeah.
They know what's real and what's not. So I would say just go in, be honest. If it hurts, it hurts. If there's a problem, there's a problem. And do it early.
Yeah.
Because that just adds so much extra stress to an already stressful time.
Right.
And, we rented when we first got down here, waiting again for what the disability rating would be. And our lease was running up. And do we have to extend our lease, or do we have to move and sign another lease and just withhold buying a house? I added so many complexities to an already complex time.
Right.
And just, self-inflicted wounds at that point.
Yeah.
Of just stress on top of stress.
Yeah.
So, that was a pretty.
Yeah. Well, because in that time, in that 8-month waiting period, you're probably dreaming, okay, you're confident that you're going to get 100%, from being retired, 20 years, 24 years, you're probably pretty confident, but there's no guarantee that you're getting 100%. You could have easily walked out with 40%. So in that time, you're like, if I get 100%, we will be able to do this, this, and this. But shit, what if I don't get 100%? What if I'm only at 40%? What if and then you're trying to read the chart and read,
Good luck, man.
That chart is crazy. I was Googling and then like trying to do the math on what it's going to take to like get the 100%, because the percentages change once you get over like 70, 80, 90%. The numbers don't equate. So, because if you look at your thing, you probably look at yours, you would have like 300%. And some weird way, you never have 300%. It equals out to 100 because of the way the numbers work.
Right.
So yeah, if you can go online, find Dave, the organization, they're also at a lot of like the VA hospitals. They'll set up tables and stuff there. So if people you locate them, they're a great resource. And they send lots of emails all the time about various different other stuff. And I mean, DAV.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think that's another thing too, is just tapping into your resources. Like, there's so many resources out there available to us that we don't take advantage of, or we just don't know they exist, or we don't know where to find them. And a lot of it's on va.gov. And you pointed me the other day, to, as I was working through some things, you're like, why are you going to pay for that? I was like, oh, because I'm going to start my own business and file for this LLC. You're like, yeah, in Texas, you're a veteran. You can go through the Texas Veteran Commission and you can get that taken care of without you having to pay for it. And I was like, no way. And then there's an abundance of resources on there, things that
So many resources.
so many resources that I wonder how much of these budgets that go to these resources that don't get used. And so they start to like cut those budgets back because there's so many veterans that are just not they're in tune with them,
There's nonprofits that tap into federal monies to help veterans pay bills, right? Like electric bills, car note, or like whatever, to help them get through. But then there's other nonprofits that raise money to help veterans pay their bills. So like people even within that world don't even know that these federal monies are out there. All they have to do is apply for it. But then the veteran doesn't know that they could go to their VSO, their Veteran Service Officer, and apply for this money that the federal government has already allocated to help them out.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there are so many resources for veterans out there, but it takes legwork.
Right.
Because what we usually do is, even though we're grown, we go to the dorm lawyer, right? And just, oh yeah, don't do that, do this.
Right.
Okay. And you don't do your own research.
Yeah.
It took me, I think 2 years into retirement to find out about Chapter 35, where my kids can go to school for free.
Yeah.
And my spouse as well.
Right.
Like no clue it existed because I was relying on other people's information. Everything I knew about my benefits is what someone told me.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my wake up call. It's like, okay, if I left all this money on the table, how much more money am I leaving on the table? And, we've earned it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's time to go, it's okay to reach out and use these resources.
That's what they're there for. That's what they're there for. That's why there's budget allocated to it. And we just, we don't either. And some of it's probably pride. There's probably a good portion of us that were just too proud to go dig into these things, or I don't need it, or whatever the case may be. But they're there. We should utilize them. They're there. If you don't know about them, reach out to somebody, get on their websites. There's so much knowledge on there, so many different avenues, different things that can provide help. If you know somebody that's struggling in a certain area, like guide them to, one of these resources that's available to you. And don't leave those things on the table. Don't let them go unheard.
Yeah, there's veterans that are struggling, and there's so many programs to help them to ease the burden, I guess. And it's just pointing them in those directions and getting them to those resources. Like I said, the veteran service officers, the VSOs, are in a lot of communities across the United States, and they just have that's their entire job.
Right.
The DAV, that's their entire job. Plus they go on Capitol Hill and rally for us and lobby for us up there. And so it's finding it, it's doing the legwork, and knowing what those are. But there shouldn't be, veterans struggling as bad as they are with the abundance of resources, but it does take swallowing your pride and raising your hand, which I think takes more courage than trying to deal with it on your own.
Yeah.
It takes more courage to raise your hand and admit you need a little bit of help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's there for everyone there. It's there for you, and utilize it.
Every person's transition is going to be different because, like for me, when I got out, with 2 young kids at the time, now I have 4, but 2 young kids at the time with child support and all those things, like the money was a factor. Like I was going to have to grind and be miserable as long as it was going to pay the bills, unfortunately, and I think you were talking about this earlier. There's no wrong or right way of how you transition from the military back into the civilian world. It's more of, do I have the tools to be successful? Do I have the right expectations when I get out? Because everybody's going to do it differently. Everybody's going to have a different situation going on that's going to dictate how they do it differently, so it's such a unique, there was no other transition ever out there. 200,000 veterans every single year, 200,000 people ETS out of the military every single year in the United States, competing against the 4 million people that are graduating from college. Because that's a reality.
Yeah, a wild number. that's a lot of people that's getting out of the military when you look at it, but it might be pretty small because how many people might be entering in, but 200,000 people on average every year, that is a lot of people that has to compete in such a small market, right? There's only so many people are looking for a small amount of jobs that are available. And boy, does that create chaos,
Yeah.
In your home. Because like when I left out of the military, since I didn't complete my service contract, I owed a year back.
Mm.
So I didn't get a last check that I thought I was getting because I signed for a signing bonus. And so they took it back. And so I'm waiting for this check to show up, and I'm thinking, oh, because I got out, it takes a little bit longer for the check to process.
Yeah.
Sir, I call over there and like, no, you don't have a check. Matter of fact, you owe us money. And I'm like, oh, well, what am I going to do now? My body's broken, and like I already didn't have a plan. So now I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Where I'm going? So it's just hustle from that point. Just, I'm going to take this job, just working all these odd and end jobs just to survive.
Right.
It was rough. That was a rough, probably 2 or 3 years before I decided I'm just going to move back home.
Yeah.
I winged it as long as I could, and then it was just like, oh, I got to go home. It was just too much of a financial burden.
Right.
And then from there, I was able to start picking up some steam. But boy, and then not having any military or any healthcare. Oh, I was praying to not get sick, because you didn't have anything. I didn't have a real job that even offered healthcare stuff. So
yeah.
How was that? Like, did you budget that in on your way out? Like, a lot of people don't recognize how much money is spent for us in the military because we could just go to sick call and go get ibuprofen, whereas on the real world, that's not the case.
Yeah. So fortunately, retiring, I had TRICARE.
True.
Because it took me a while to get my disability rating. But I will say, shortly after officially retiring and just having TRICARE, I had to stay the night at the hospital with some heart issues, and I got a bill, and I kind of laughed. I was like, "That's silly." And then I wait. This says this is a bill, and I have to pay it. I was like, I didn't know what to do. I'd never paid a medical bill before, and that put a lot in. Because now I have continuous continuous appointments with the cardiologist and had a procedure done, and I got a bill for $15,000 after my procedure, and I'm like, whoa, what kind of deductible is this, right? And having to fight insurance companies, like I've never had to do any of that. And so it is kind of weird being, in my 40s and calling the insurance for the very first time, like, hey, I think there's a problem. I don't know if this is right. But yeah, that issue is huge because you have to look at deductibles and plans and, well, should I go am I really that sick? Should I go? Because it's not, well, I got a little cough, let me go get a cold pack at sick call anymore.
Right.
Now that comes with, a bill on top of it. So you kind of pick and choose how sick you are or how hurt you are, or, all those things.
Yeah.
Funny, like we didn't have to choose a medical plan because we were just in.
Right.
Just went to the doctor and it was fine. Now it's like, oh, do I take Blue Cross Blue Shield? Am I on Anthem on this people? Am I doing this one? And then you don't understand the lingo. You're calling the HR or something and asking, hey, can y'all help me? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
You got to choose, and you basically boil it down to what's my deductible I have to pay and hope for the best because you don't know what you're reading.
I mean, the funny thing is that like the stuff that you would go to sick call for because you didn't want to do a 10-mile run in the morning, like you ain't going to the doctor anymore in the world. There's something, you're going to get a bill with that. So you're like, I'll go on that. I'll go on that, 10-miler today. Yeah. It's so different. Absolutely. It's a very different world. So let's take it back a couple of steps. You did that internship with Hire Our Heroes, and essentially they ended up offering you the position. But you chose at the end, you felt like it wasn't the right fit for you. And so you chose to not accept the position with them. You talked a little bit about how the expectation of salary was a lot lower than you had anticipated. And so you end up saying, nope, I'm out. Like, thanks, but no thanks. And then what?
And then the real stress began.
Mm.
So again, you know, leading up to this point, going through taps, talking with other people and hearing, oh, you're so marketable. You're so marketable. Everyone's going to want you. You got all this experience. You got all this leadership. You're this, you're this, you're this. I went in like, I don't need this little job. Anywhere I apply, they're going to want to hire me. They're going to fight over me.
Mm.
And so I didn't sweat it. And I was like, all right, whatever. I'll just throw my name in a couple hats and I'll get picked up in a couple weeks and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I got 3 months of terminal leave. I'm good.
You're good. You're
I
going.
got nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
And then about 2.5 months in, I hadn't found work and nobody wanted me. And I was just a big ball of stress. I had 2 weeks left until I got my last paycheck, until insurance ran out. 2 weeks. And it was roughly right around 2 weeks. And I was under so much stress, I actually developed something. I don't know what it was, but I couldn't drink. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. Anything I ate or drank, it would just come right back up. And so I went to the doctor. They did a biopsy. They're trying to figure out also what was wrong with me. And right at 0 hour, I got a job as operations manager at a call center, and I could eat again and I could drink again. It was just all that stress. Because I remember one night just like breaking down with my wife, and I'm like, I'm going to have to go flip burgers at Whataburger. Like, nobody will hire me. And literally, that was the next step, is to walk into Whataburger and flip burgers with some 16-year-olds and be like, wow, this is my life.
This is what it boiled down to.
Like, all these years of experience and all this leadership and all this stuff that I thought I was is all I am, is a damn burger flipper. And so that was a rough night. That was not a good night. But fortunately, at 0 hour, it worked out, and I found a position. And but if it wasn't for that, like, I don't know. But I only got that job through network. You know, it wasn't me applying anywhere. It wasn't my resume. It wasn't my pedigree. It was within my network, being referenced for a position and getting an interview. And so, actually every job I've had since hiring our heroes has been through my network. I'm on my 3rd job right now, in 3 years, kind of weird.
Quitter.
Yeah. At this point, it's not the job, it's me. Right. But it's all been through my network.
Right.
Every single position I've got I knew somebody, they got my foot in the door, and then my interview techniques and skills or whatever, has helped me get the job.
Yeah.
But not one job through LinkedIn, not one job through Indeed or any of these boards, right? These job boards, not one interview, nothing. And so, it's just been really fortunate to have a solid network down here, that kind of help give me in some doors.
Yeah. Was it because of the mindset, like the idea, the misconception that, you're going to throw your name in that hat, that I'm not going to take this hire? Let me rephrase this. If you knew now what you had known then, would you have thought differently of taking the job out of the Hire Our Heroes, knowing how difficult it was going to be for you to land on your feet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have definitely taken the job and just had it be a filler while I was looking for something else. Or, honestly, I probably should have given more of a shot, to be honest with you. But I was working 12, 13-hour days.
Yeah.
So it was just, I was like, I've done this. I've lived this life. I'm over it, And so I think the smart move would have been to take the job and searched but just to not work at all. With nothing in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Like, it was just pure luck that I found something right in time. But I was definitely playing with fire. I think some of it was just pride. A little bit of pride was mixed in, and just not feeling. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. But
Right.
It was almost like nah, this is not me.
Yeah, yeah.
It just, and I think it was pride talking that, because it made me feel so uncomfortable. Instead of embracing that and taking that as an opportunity to learn and get better and learn a new trade, I took it as nah, it's not for me.
Yeah, slap
You
in
know?
the face.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's almost like I'm taking several steps backwards here. I'm an assistant manager. What is that?
Say, luckily,
So that networking, was that networking come from friends, family, like gaps, or just people that you were meeting along the way at wherever venues you were at and just speaking?
yes, yes, and yes. Yeah, absolutely. It was all of it, really. Um, I used to, tell my airmen, and it was some advice that was given to me is every single person you meet in your life is a job interview.
Mm.
So
Good business.
every time I meet someone, it's your best foot forward. You exchange, maybe not exchange information, but you put your best foot forward. You don't ruin this opportunity because you don't really know who this person is, and you don't know when they may cross paths again, right? So in 2016, I started a volunteer program at the San Antonio Food Bank.
Mhm.
And through there, I met, I met the workers there. And then you fast forward 6 years later, 7 years later, and he reaches out to me on social to see if I was interested in a job because there was an opening. Just 7 years later.
Yeah.
Right? But from our interactions in the volunteer nonprofit style world, he remembered that and thought I'd be a good fit in a nonprofit position. Right.
Right.
So every person you meet is a job interview. And so, yes, it was family, it was friends, it was past coworkers that have helped me get positions. And so even with past coworkers, it was somebody I worked with in 2008 that let me know about my current position. So 14 years later, 15 years later, um, that connection that if I was not a good person back then, if I wasn't a hard worker, if I wasn't a good NCO, never would have recommended me for that position because that's all they knew of me was from 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So you just never know when someone you work with or someone you meet, you're going to cross paths again. So that's always been my big word of advice to, when I'm mentoring somebody is every single person you meet is a job interview.
Mm.
There's a message there. Take that down.
Yeah, for sure. I think you touched on a lot of valid points. You talked about, the networking. You talked about, really setting, your mindset, getting out of your own head. But what you didn't talk about is why you were under so much pressure. Why were you coming to that 0 hour? Because you hadn't got your rating yet.
Mm-hmm.
There was going to be a period, right, where you retired, and then, am I going to get paid on the first? Does my retirement check get kicked in right away? Is there a waiting period? Like, because it's the DoD, it's the Air Force. Like, they could certainly do something, and now you're fighting
Glitch.
Yeah, there's a glitch, and now you're not, and now you're not, getting that paycheck anymore. So, there's definitely all kinds of stress, but you've got stress going on. You've got all these things going on. You can't find a job. You're out of your element. You're no longer in uniform. And now you're no longer around you guys. Like, how do you navigate that?
So there's a lot of phone calls. Like we still call each other.
Yeah.
My old chief at McGuire, he got a phone call probably a couple times a week, probably way more than he wanted. I thought you retired, go away. But it was a lot of just still those phone calls with the old team. But I also feel really fortunate. Again, I have a pretty strong network at a happenstance down here in San Antonio. And so every Sunday we meet up for golf, me and a couple of buddies, and we've all served together over the years, and we meet up, and we've all known each other so long that it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's okay to be transparent, and it's okay to have real talk and talk about struggles and talk about what you're going through, and you're not going to get judged, because more than likely they're going through the exact same thing.
Right.
All four of us now are retired. And so we've all gone through some kind of struggle. and some kind of identity crisis, or you name it. And so fortunately with this group, I'm lucky enough to have a group that I can have those real conversations with and let my guard down and really just kind of let it all out.
Yeah.
And we're each other's soundboards and give each other advice. And I say that's probably the main reason I was able to get through unscathed, because it was dark. There was some really, really dark times. I mean, right when I was transitioning was the height of the Afghan, debacle of our pullout.
Yeah.
And that was just tearing me up, and couldn't find work. I'm watching this stuff happen on TV, and it just so much happening, so much turmoil. And if it wasn't for my network, I don't know if I would have got through unscathed.
Yeah.
It was a very rough patch. So just having those people around to have those conversations and feeling comfortable and allowing myself to be vulnerable, I think, and really talking about how I feel, instead of like usually what we do is, right, hey, what's up, dude? Yeah, cool, catch the game. Like, we're actually having conversations that had depth and really getting to the root cause of issues and giving each other some solid advice.
Yeah. One thing that really sticks out to me is your ability to build a network. I didn't do that. I was not good at building networks, and part of that, I think, I was young and dumb, 28-year-old, about to be 29, getting out, out of the Army. That's all I knew. Probably a little cocky because, that's what we are in the 82nd, paratroopers. But I didn't have a network. I didn't, I probably couldn't even tell you what the term meant, probably would have said, is that some IT thing or something? Like I didn't know. And I wasn't, I had my relationships with the guys that I was, but for me, like, it was a blessing and a curse that I got put on recruiting assignment, because I didn't know then that was going to be the last thing I did in the Army. And that gave me the transferable skill to go into the corporate world. And it wasn't until to be honest with you guys, I didn't even know that recruiters were a real thing in the corporate world. Like, I really didn't. It wasn't anything that I looked into, right out the gate. And so if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have it would have been a lot harder. And it was already hard because I went almost 9 months without landing a job. But the opposite side of that was all the guys that I grew up with in the Army, all the guys I grew up with in the 82nd that I had done a couple of tours with, were all in Afghanistan, and I was getting out. I was becoming a civilian. They're overseas. And, like, I left, and I don't feel like I lost touch with them. I lost touch with a lot of them. And it wasn't until recently, over the last couple of years, through Facebook, that I started getting back in touch with them, and I didn't have that, coming out. I was flying solo. And I think a lot of guys end up flying solo, it's just them, it's just them and their spouse. And because we don't do a good job, because we don't ever think about the future. We're never thinking about, one day I'm taking off this uniform, and when I do, what is that going to look like? Am I talking to my spouse about that? Am I talking to my family about that? Like, do I have a plan already? We just expect that we're going to get out of the military and life is going to be this grand thing, and we're going to get to park right in front of the doors at Lowe's because they've got the veteran plaques out there, right? And that's, and we get all these perks. But the reality is that it's a whole nother battle that you're going to go through the day that uniform comes off.
Absolutely. I think we take it for granted. You put it on every day. You go home, take it off. Put it on, take it off. You got your same crew, your boys with you, girls, whatever, that hang out in your squad, and you got your close-knit group. And then once you're gone, especially in times like the Afghanistan, I was the 9/11 stuff. So, they're shipping out, they're going, and you're not. And you feel like, wait, I'm supposed to be with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody that's left here is not the people that you rode with.
Right.
You know, those were your buddies, your comrades. Now you're with the associates, people that you really weren't that tight with. And now you're trying to make some new friends, and so then you bag back and you end up being by yourself. And then now you're struggling with whatever demons you got going on, and there's no one really to talk to you about it because you don't feel like anybody relates to you about your struggles of, you know, they don't know our daily lives. Most civilians don't know really what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're single, then it's even worse because now there's no pillow talk with anybody. You're just by yourself in your apartment trying to figure it out. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a lot different when you're single, you know. I mean, it's going to be hard regardless.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard regardless, but when you don't have anybody and everybody that you do have expects you to be this person that you no longer are, like it just starts to compound and compound and compound and compound, and then you got the stresses of life and everything else. The bills aren't getting paid, and you're just like, man, what the hell am I doing? What am I doing? Like, I used to be something bigger than myself, and now I'm like scraping pennies together to survive. You know, it's
Yeah, I went to go try to get emergency food stamps when I got out,
mm,
and they were like, "Yeah, sell your car." It's work.
yeah,
Can't do that. But it got really real for me when they scraped the decal off the car.
mm,
Like, I was kind of ready. I was doing music and stuff like that, so I was like, "Oh yeah, everything's gonna work out. I'm gonna be a star." And but so I was kind of feeling a certain way, and then once they took the decal off, and I was no longer gonna be able to get on the base,
yeah.
that's when I was like, "Oh man, wait. Like, is there any way to go back? Is this really over?" You know, and then, you know, the next week comes around and I'm not going to the base at all, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a weird one.
Man, and today you're still navigating. You're still trying to figure it out. Like you've gone through a couple of jobs, you know, some good jobs, but you learned a lot of things from them, and you're starting to figure out who you are and what you want and what's important to you. Like, where do you see yourself now? Like in today, you know, 3 years ago, fast forward to today, you know, where are you, like, mentally? You know, are you fulfilled again? Like, walk me through that.
So I'm definitely in a way better spot than I was 3 years ago. That's for sure. And I feel content.
Yeah.
I guess that's the right word, content. Over the moon or happy. No, I'm not there yet. And it was funny, was on my way over here, I was talking to one of my friends. And again, we're pretty vulnerable and open with each other. And, you know, he was talking about, he's kind of in the same boat. You know, he's making good money. He has a good job. It's work from home, a lot of leeway, but he's just not happy. And his wife said, "What are you looking for? A unicorn?" You know, and I was like, "Well, don't we deserve a unicorn?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, why? Like, if you're going to be chasing something that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
like you're never going to be satisfied. So when can you look at the blessings that you have and be okay with it and say, okay, yeah, I got to deal with some BS, right? Some dumb stuff, but that tends to be where we always focus all our attention is on the negative and we ignore all the positive.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of focusing on these couple of negative things, right? The boss upsets me sometimes or whatever that is. I make my own schedule. I work from home. I get paid really well. I got the freedom to go golf in the middle of the day. Like, let's go look at some of these positives that you have.
Right.
And where else are you going to find that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and name one job that doesn't come with its share of BS.
Oh yeah.
You know, or even in the military, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, I can't wait to PCS because of da 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 da, and you PCS, and there's still da 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 there. You know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. For sure.
you know, so you have to find like the little bits of happiness within what you're doing, or you're just gonna drive yourself nuts.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like in a spouse or in a relationship. There's no such thing as the perfect.
There's not.
There's going to be an imperfection there. And
wait, hold on for the camera. My wife is perfect.
Mine too. I'm talking about other relationships.
Yeah, not ours.
Yeah. But you know what is it okay, right? That they have these little imperfections, because look how perfect they are in all these other ways, and it just outshines it. And it just helped me really reflect on my current position of like, okay, am I just drilling down on all the negative stuff and not looking at the big picture of all the positives that come with the job?
Right.
And so I just think the industry isn't for me. I fell in love with the nonprofit world. It's always kind of been my wheelhouse. And so I think that's kind of my next pivot, is back into the nonprofit world. But it just, those little talks again with the people that you can have real conversations with, really help open your horizons and really make you look at where you're at in life. And honestly, when I look at it that way, I'm doing good, right? I got a good paying job. I got Monday through Friday, no weekends, no shift work. I get to spend time finally with my wife.
Right.
Like all the things I said I wanted when I retired, I have right now. But yeah, I still find a way to be unhappy.
Right.
It's just kind of looking through a different lens and realizing, okay, things are okay. It's not horrible right now.
Dream.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. We sometimes just get caught up in these moments. We get caught up in these things of like, because we're looking, like you mentioned, we're looking at others and where they're at, their successes, and it makes us feel lesser.
Mm-hmm.
But those things are just, they're make believe. They're make believe. Are you healthy? Are you happy? Are you getting by? And maybe for some, it's this week I was able to get by. And maybe that's where you're at. Maybe you got to take it day to day, week to week, but you keep doing that and you keep stringing those along. You'll get to a point where you're just happy.
Mm-hmm.
I was chasing the dollars for a long time, and partially because I had child support and the insurance and all that stuff. But when I finally got to this point where I will say I got it all back, right? Where I was able to get it all back, because I lost everything. When I got out, I lost everything. I had a house that went foreclosure. I lost, because of child support, I couldn't find a job. Like my savings went completely dry. I lost it all. And it was years after that, years of hard work and dedication and the late nights and all that stuff. And I finally got it all back. And once I got it all back and things started to realign themselves, I was like, why am I doing this? I'm not happy going to work and spending 10 hours a day at work, making this hour and a half commute every single day. Like, this isn't worth it, And then I did the same. I started to like really reflect on what's going to make me happy, and I went through a whole bunch of other things too. But I finally figured it out. And I think the quicker you can figure it out for you, start thinking about those things. If you are getting out in the next year, even if it's 6 months, right? 6 months, a year, really 2 years, you need to really start thinking about, am I getting out? Am I staying in? But if you're going to get out relatively soon, start writing down what your expectations are, and then networking with others and finding out what is the realistic expectation. That'll save you so much heartache and struggle. And maybe it might tell you like, hey, it's not the time. I still got another 2 or 3 years.
And that's why I'd say, if you're at the 2-year mark, go to TAPS. Go to TAPS and just see, like what's out there. Like go to somebody to look at your resume, apply for a couple jobs, even though you just kind of see what's realistic. And maybe you're like, okay, at the 2-year mark was always my suggestion, right? You always get the people that are like, I'm just doing one enlistment and I'm out. Okay, you're 2 years out, go sign up for TAPS. And let's just see, okay, is it time for you to get out? Is that realistic? And what do you need to do in the next 2 years to make yourself marketable when you get out?
Mm-hmm.
And all right, do you need to finish that degree? Do you need to get a certificate? What is it that you need to do to position yourself? I was always a really good, like, listen to what I say, not what I do. But go to TAPS, and then 1 year out, go to TAPS. and then start having those realistic conversations if you're married with your spouse. All right, is this going to work for us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, we're about ready to lose all these little benefits that we've grown accustomed to. Are you sure this is what we should do? Am I just making an emotional decision? Am I emotionally hijacked right now? And I hate my boss, so screw this, I'm getting out. Well, you're only hurting yourself. You're not hurting your boss because he's re-enlisting.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a PCS is what you need to do instead of get out, you know? And so it's a year or two out is where you start really taking that hard look and figuring out why you're getting out. Are you positioned to get out? And what do you need to do to prepare yourself to get out?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, through our educational benefits, you can get, you know, a certification in welding or carpentry or whatever, or you can use it to get your degree. But that's a whole other thing, man. Everyone's like, "Yo, get a bachelor's, get a bachelor's,
Right.
get a bachelor's," and everyone's like, "Well, you need a master's, you need a master's," you know. And so it just depends on the industry you want to enter and the qualifications needed. But I know my life would have panned out better if I would have at least got my bachelor's before I separated. I think a lot of that, I took a lot of opportunity off the table by not having a degree when I retired, when I retired through the program. And there was only a couple of the companies that would accept someone that didn't have a math or a bachelor's degree.
Really? Through Hire Our Heroes?
Yes.
Wow.
There's only a handful. And so that's something to really look at is, you know, I had my two little CCAF, my two little baby associates that are basically a high school diploma. And so that really shrunk, you know, who I could even work for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That goes back to knowing the industry in which you want to go in.
Mm-hmm.
Like as you prepare to go out, what is your industry looking for? Do they want a bachelor's degree? Do you need bachelor's plus 5 years of experience? Do you need master's degree? And is schooling for you? Like, is a 4-year program your deal, or is it going to be a plumber, electrician, doing stuff like that? Is that more your gig? Be honest with yourselves. I know I still have to be honest with myself. I still have open talks with my wife all the time. So I can get some assistance in making the right decision that we need to do for the family. And not just jumping off the ledge, making crazy decisions because I'm emotional about whatever I'm doing. So yeah, take time out, and structure out your time of leaving the military. Again, like the fella said, you know, when you're deciding to go and you make those decisions, it may not be time, and be comfortable with that. If it's not time, it's not time. Don't push a door open that's not there to be pushed open.
Mm-hmm.
Leave it closed. Do another tour. It's fine. And then rework the program.
Yeah.
And be willing to keep reworking the program until it's time for you to actually depart.
Yeah, for sure. Man, thank you for being here with us and joining us today. I would ask you where people could connect with you, but guess what? If you go from www.FromBootsNumber2.com, you will find Rudy on there. You could connect with him there. You could connect with him, Rudy@FromBootsToSuits.com is his official email address. If you want to be a guest on the show, hit us up. The email address is Glenn Jr., John, or Rudy at FromBootsToSuits.com, or you can just send it to info@FromBootsToSuits.com. Make sure that you follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff on all of our socials. We appreciate all you guys that are already doing that. We are starting to see just an uproar and an uptick of views and subscriptions and hours watched, and wholeheartedly, I couldn't thank you guys enough. But before we let you go, I got to ask you one thing, man. What is the funniest story you've got in your 20 years or 24 years? You could take it all the way back to the Coast Guard.
Let's see. All right. For me, it has to be, it was 2011, I believe. Did a year with the Army in Afghanistan.
Oh God, here we go.
Yeah. So luckily, we got substandard of living pay because those quarters were not up
Yeah.
par for us.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But one of the other fuel guys, Air Force fuel guy, dropped the gas cap and between the armor and the skin of the vehicle, and he reached down to grab it and got his arm stuck, and he couldn't get out. Couldn't get out. And I was in the area and I hear him yelling for help, and I walk over there and I'm like, "What's up, man?" He's like, I need help. I'm stuck. And so I went and got my camera to film it. I didn't go tell anybody. I just filmed it. And we had special forces. We were a fueling point for special forces. They came on. Next thing you know, there's probably 20 people standing around watching them before someone decided to go get some wrenches, and they had to unloose all the armor and get them out. So then I started emailing the video to all of all the guys, so everyone had it. And then I caught wind of the commander having it, or wanted to talk to me about it. And I was like, we took this joke way too.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, why didn't you email it to me yet? I need a copy of this." And so, part of it was, we're about 8 months into this deployment, so we're all a little batty, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to meet the guy for it to even be funnier, because the guy's wrenching on the armor, and he's like, "Do you need me to move?" And we're like, "Where are you gonna go? You're stuck." It was just the whole thing, and that's just the funniest part of the whole thing. Was at the very bottom, there's a slit. So if you drop the gas cap, you just reach in and grab it at the bottom.
Oh,
so he went in for no reason. It was all right there. And if you knew the guy, it made it 20 times funnier.
Oh, man.
It was a nice comedic relief to a not so funny.
Yeah. Of course. Because, you Air Force guys are used to, sleeping in hotels, and you're on an Army base, and we don't have that life.
Horrible.
We don't have that life.
What is a cot?
Yeah.
That's cot that you speak of.
That's why we all have back problems.
Why are you sleeping in a tent?
That should just be a thing. Like when you go to file your claim, did you sleep on a cot? Yes, I did. 100%.
Yeah, right there.
Done.
Yep.
Hey, it was a pleasure having you guys. We'll look forward to the next one, and we'll see you guys soon again. Please make sure you continue to follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Leave us a comment. If there's somebody out there that you feel would be an excellent guest on the show, let us know. We'd love to have them on. Like we're talking, there's no right or wrong way of how you transition. There's no perfect game plan of you transitioning. But what we want to do is build a community, build a network, build the resources so that we have, just an abundance of knowledge and abundance of help to navigate through that transition, so that as you're transitioning, you don't have to go through what many of us have gone through and have felt. And, we just want to help you guys, want to continue to serve. That's why we joined the military, was to serve, to be something bigger than ourselves. For me, I think, you talk about going back into a nonprofit, into that world. For me, it's like, I feel like I never fulfilled my duty. And with my years of experience in the corporate world, from a recruiting standpoint and a human resources standpoint, like, I feel like I could use my knowledge to continue to help and serve. And I know Glenn Jr. too, you're all about serving your community and helping. So that's why we're here. We're here for you guys. If there's a topic that you want us to talk about, bring it to us. We'll be sure to cover it. Once again, thank you. We'll see y'all next time.